They thought you were harmless, just another name buried in the static of the crowd. Another predictable piece on the board. You played your part so convincingly that they overlooked you, smiled at you, dismissed you. That's how it always begins, with underestimation so deep it feels like safety. You let them think you were slow, fragile, forgettable. Because when they think you pose no threat, they show you everything. Their strategies, their games, their limits. And you kept receipts, memorized patterns, absorbed pressure. People love to perform around those they don't respect. But when the curtain fell and the real version of you stepped forward, focused, calm, unapologetic, they panicked. Because now the story changed. Now they weren't in control. Now they weren't prepared. What they discovered wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was surgical. A mind sharpened by silence. A soul trained in storms. A presence so composed it looked divine. And in the face of that, even institutions grow nervous. You had been building something sacred in private, not to impress, not to flex, but because your piece demanded foundation. You weren't posting about it. You weren't making noise. You were growing roots so deep that when you finally moved, the ground shook. That's what they didn't see coming. The clarity, the precision, the refusal to be pulled into narratives that once defined you. You weren't reacting. You were reconstructing. Every insult became a data point. Every betrayal, a compass. You used their chaos to design discipline. And while they thought you were still healing, still searching, still unsure, you had already shifted into someone unrecognizable. Not better, just untouchable. And when that version of you entered the room, they didn't just lose control, they lost context. Nothing they knew about you applied anymore. That's what made it dangerous. That's why the alarms went off. You became the anomaly, the variable they couldn't decode. Not because you were unpredictable, but because you were governed by something they couldn't access. Integrity, depth, stillness, that unnerved them. In a world of copy, paste personas, you were original, and originality is untraceable. You didn't speak the language of approval anymore. You moved with codes. Codes built from failure, recovery, and detachment. They tried to read you through old files, labels, assumptions. But everything they had on you was obsolete. You weren't running on desire anymore. You were running on alignment. That kind of clarity is unnerving, especially to those who benefited from your confusion. They needed you insecure to manage you. But now, they're filing reports trying to figure out how you slipped the system so quietly. Let them investigate. Let them retrace your steps. They'll never find what made you. Because what you became wasn't born in daylight. It was forged in nights no one stayed for, in decisions no one applauded, in rebuilding what you didn't break. They're scared because you're not angry. You're aware. You don't yell. You withdraw. You don't perform. You align. And when someone stops performing, they become unpredictable to manipulators. Your presence alone exposes every room you enter, not by what you say, but by what you no longer tolerate. They can't figure out when you changed, how you got so composed, why you don't need anything from them anymore. But the real answer: you died in plain sight, and what came back wasn't a person, it was a principle. The old you was easy to access, always explaining, always softening, always doubting your intuition. But now, you look people in the eye and let them sit with your silence. You let them wonder what you're thinking. You let them experience the space where your neediness used to be. And that space, it's haunted by the echo of your former self, the version they could guilt, manipulate, flatter. That version is gone, and they know it. That's why they're scrambling. That's why they're projecting. That's why even authority figures are asking questions. Because you didn't just evolve. You vanished and reappeared as someone with no leash, no dependence, no appetite for their validation. They didn't expect you to play the long game. They thought they had time, that you'd keep orbiting, keep justifying, keep showing up. But you moved in silence for so long that when you finally emerged, you had outpaced them completely. That's what real growth looks like. It doesn't run. It calculates. It prepares. It turns wounds into architecture. You studied while they slandered, practiced while they postured, and when they blinked, you had already flipped the script. Now they want access. Now they want explanation. But what you've built can't be reverse engineered, because it wasn't built from spite. It was built from solitude. It wasn't about them. It was about survival. And when people realized they never mattered as much as they assumed, they panic. The ones who mock your healing process are often the ones who fear what you become afterward. They try to interrupt your journey because they can sense the threat in your peace. Your peace makes people restless. It reminds them of what they haven't addressed in themselves. You're not loud, but you're reflective, and mirrors terrify the dishonest. You didn't fight them. You didn't expose them. You just stopped needing them. And that cut deeper than any confrontation. That's the move they couldn't handle, becoming invisible to the person they once controlled. Your indifference was a door they never expected to close. And now they're locked out, looking in, watching you win in silence. At first, they thought it was a coincidence, that your absence, your glow, your peace was temporary. But patterns don't lie. You were gone, and you were not coming back. Not to the dynamic, not to the performance, not to the version of you that tolerated being less. You didn't announce it. You became it. That's the difference. People who change for revenge always come back to prove something. But people who change for truth, they vanish, and the absence becomes the proof. They start searching for explanations. Who influenced you? What got into you? But the truth is simply, you finally took yourself seriously. And when you did, you became untouchable. Not because of armor, but because of alignment. The most threatening thing about you now, you're not reactive. That's what's driving them crazy. They press buttons that no longer exist. They try to revive old arguments, hoping to trap you in who you used to be. But you don't flinch. You don't fight. You just observe. That kind of calm is lethal in a world obsessed with chaos. You've become the variable they can't recreate. They can try to copy your image, your tone, your presence, but they'll always miss the source. The source was earned in suffering, protected by solitude, anchored in self-awareness, and the people who tried to break you. They now have to live with the fact that all they did was make you better. You didn't just heal. You outgrew the entire context. And that's why they can't reach you now. Because healing is what they expected. They thought you'd do the yoga, read the books, maybe start setting soft boundaries. They could have prepared for that version of you. The one still tethered to the same rooms, just with better posture and stronger vocabulary. But what they didn't expect was transcendence. That you'd expand so far beyond the shared story that the story itself would collapse. You didn't just get better. You became unrecognizable to the environment that once knew every scar on your spirit. You didn't decorate the cage, you left it. And now, the ones who once held the keys are just spectators outside a life they no longer influence. That's the real rupture, when your evolution doesn't need to be explained. Because the people who need an explanation no longer qualify to receive one. There's a moment in growth where you stop trying to fix the dynamic and start questioning why you ever accepted it in the first place. That's the shift that outgrows context. When the questions become deeper than the conflict. When you start wondering who you had to become in order to survive that connection, that space, that standard. You saw yourself dimming not because you lacked light, but because the room couldn't handle full voltage. You realized it wasn't healing to tolerate the same treatment with more awareness. Real healing meant leaving the equation altogether, not to prove a point, but to stop being part of a system that required your self-betrayal to function. That's not growth within. That's evolution beyond. That's the level of clarity that doesn't ask for change. It exits. You began to notice the mismatch in energy, in values, in depth. And for a while, you made yourself wrong for that. You thought maybe you were being cold, too distant, too ambitious, too awake. But you weren't too anything. You were simply no longer compatible with the emotional infrastructure you had outgrown. That's what happens when you stop arguing and start observing. You become fluent in disconnects. You realize the people you once fought to be understood by never had the tools to hold your truth anyway. And suddenly, the need to be chosen dissolves because the room no longer fits the architecture of your mind. They didn't change. You evolved. And evolution is always lonely at first, but it's also irreversible.